That is my impression of a inbred cannibal. How'd I do? Today, we will be talking about the original 2003 Wrong Turn, not the embarrassment 2021 Wrong Turn that needs to be wiped from the planet and bleached from my mind, because what was that? That movie was so embarrassing, and I'm disgusted that they used the Wrong Turn franchise's name to promote that monstrosity of a movie. The Wrong Turn 2003 was written by Alan McElroy, and it was produced by these people. Also, yes, this is still 31 Days of Halloween, and this movie can be talked about on Halloween because there is literally a lyric in one of the songs that plays in the background at the very start that says it's Halloween. Side note, I need to talk about something for a second. Yesterday afternoon, my neighbors were moving their caravan around. They moved their caravan right outside of my window as they were moving it. You want to know what my neighbor said? Because I can hear everything that is said outside my window. I don't know if they can hear me, but I can hear them. You know what he said? Yeah, this is right outside of her room. Her being me. He moved his caravan right outside of my room so he can look out the window and look directly in. That's creepy, isn't it? Like, that's weird, right? I'm trying really hard to stay calm. Honestly, this man and his wife have been watching me since I was 15, and I thought that once I turned 18, they wouldn't want to watch me anymore. But no, so. Did you know that The Wrong Turn is loosely based on a real story? A really long time ago in Scotland, there was this guy called Sawney Bean. It is said that in 25 years, he ate over 1,000 people. He used those people not only to feed himself, but to feed his entire inbred family. There is debate about whether or not this guy was real or he even existed. Some people say it's just a legend. Some people say that it was just made up. Either way, you can visit the caves that he supposedly lived in, and I want to visit the caves one day. Maybe. I probably never will, but you know. Also, a really bad habit that I have is calling this movie The Wrong Turn, even though it's only called Wrong Turn. Anyway, the synopsis of this movie is as followed. A guy is driving down back roads when he runs into the back of a parked car. There was a group of people in that car and he joins that group of people. They are all stranded in the middle of the woods and are being hunted down by a family of inbred cannibals. Everything is set in West Virginia, in Greenbrier backcountry. And yes, I am one of those conspiracy nuts that believes that people far removed from society live in these forests very far away from civilization. I would also say that this movie takes a lot of inspiration from the movie called The Hills Have Eyes. This movie also reminds me a little bit of The Descent. So if you like movies set out of civilization where people are being hunted down by monstrous individuals, then you'll like this movie. The opening scene is a bird's eye view of a very large forest. A forest so vast you wouldn't want to get lost in it because you'd never be able to find your way out. We meet two rock climbers, a girl called Haley, a guy called Rich. They are climbing up this rock wall. Rich easily makes it to the top, but Haley is having a little bit of trouble. She loses her grip off the wall and falls backwards, almost literally dying. If it wasn't for her safety harness thing, she would have fallen down. Naturally, she screams, and Rich is like, "We're 50 miles away from anybody. Why are you screaming? Who are you screaming to?" I would dump him. Haley tells Rich to pull her up, but he just disappears, and she's like, "Rich, pull me up, pull me up." But there is no answer from him. Pretend this is the top of the rock wall, and pretend this is Rich's body. Out of nowhere, his body flops like that on top of the rock wall. So he's like kind of dangling over a little bit. Blood patters onto Haley's face. Blood that is dripping from his hand. When out of nowhere, he is dragged backwards, and then his entire body is then thrown overboard. He lands with a loud thud on the ground somewhere. Then somebody starts pulling Haley up the wall. The same somebody who threw Rich's body off. She tries to unclip her carabiner, the thing that links the rope and the harness together so that if you slip, you don't fall and die. But time is running out because she keeps getting pulled up the wall. So she pulls out a knife and starts cutting the rope that is linking her to the safety thing. I don't know, I'm not good with all this rock climbing lingo. She is now attached to the wall with no safety measures. She sees Rich's rope and she tries to reach it. Unfortunately, she slips backwards and lands on the ground right near Rich's dead body. Sorry for the change in scenery. I just got back from watching Saw X and I'm just trying to recover because that movie ripped out my heartstrings and it's making me really question my morals. Okay, back to talking about Wrong Turn. Where did we leave off again? Okay, so Haley is looking at Rich's dead body, but she can't look at him for too long. because someone starts hysterically laughing. Remember, they are 50 miles away from anyone, so who would be laughing? She starts running in the woods, but she knows where she's going. She doesn't get lost. Her car is in sight, but then a barbed wire is tripped and she trips over it. She is dragged backwards and there is a very unpleasant squelching sound. Then we have this very dramatic title screen that shows us news clippings and journal articles. Here we start learning a little bit more about the movie and the context and everything in that realm. It's in this part that we explicitly find out that this movie is set in West Virginia. It's set in the mountains and there is a legend of the mountain men. They are said to have deformities caused by inbreeding. They have genetic mutations and a resistance to pain. They are prone to have violent outbursts. We see barbed wire and pictures of these people. Some of them can be a little bit confronting to look at, so I'm not going to put any of them on the screen, but if you just look up Wrong Turn, Cannibals, you'll be able to see the people. Remember Hallie from the start? Yeah, well, we see her shoe. It is all bloodied, like her foot was chopped off or something. We see an overwhelming amount of news articles and missing persons posters. The one that really got me was the one of the missing little girl. Like, that just made me feel so sick. The last image we get on this title screen is of this raggedy nail and something to do with someone's mouth. I don't know, I just cannot stand raggedy nails. I can't stand raggedy hands. I just really don't like anything to do with hands. It just unsettles me deeply. Okay, so that entire part was just setting up the movie and setting up the vibe. Now we get to the actual main plot of this movie. Someone is driving down the highway and the radio is on. An evangelist over the radio says, "When you plant seed in your own kin, you anger God." Now, I don't know what on earth this man was talking about and what on earth this quote was in relation to, but all I know is that statement can be applied to inbreeding. So, yeah. Then a newscaster says that they still haven't been able to find Haley or Rich. Back to the dude driving down the highway. His name is Chris. There has been a chemical spill on the road, so he is stuck behind a lot of traffic. It's gonna take hours to clean up, and this is problematic for him because he needs to be in some place called Raleigh by 7 p.m. so he can do an interview. He decides that he's going to take a back way. He calls up this lady Doris to let him know that he's going to be like half an hour late. As he is driving along, he finds this sketchy little sign, so he just follows it. This road is leading him to a gas station. And as he drives, there are so many abandoned cars. Now, if you have seen The Hills Have Eyes, you know that seeing a lot of abandoned cars is a very, very bad thing. Chris wants to use the payphone at the gas station, but it doesn't work. Here, we then meet Gas Station Man. Whenever you meet these types of people in movies, you just know that they know everything. They are very wise, they know what's going on, and they cannot be fooled. Chris finds a map on the wall and he follows a dotted line and decides that he's going to go on that road. As Chris leaves, he tells the gas station man to take care. The gas station man, under his breath, as Chris is long gone, says, "You're going to be the one who needs to take care." I love foreshadowing in movies. I love it so much. Then we get another bird's eye view of the forest just to show us how vast it really is. Chris is now driving on a dirt road very far removed from civilization. He gets to a fork in the road and goes down the road with a sign that says Bear Mountain Road. Wouldn't he stop and think, why would that road be called Bear Mountain Road? I can't even give this man any advice in this movie. He's just gone. He's got no hope. Chris sees this dead deer on the road and he can't stop looking at it. Side note, I hate seeing roadkill. It makes me so sad because those are animals and those animals have families and then I want to see their families again. As Chris is distracted by the deer, he keeps looking at it when he then crashes into the back of another parked car. Here we then meet the other people in this movie. First, we meet this very nice couple called Scott and Carly. They are extremely friendly and they are very, very concerned about Chris's safety. They keep wanting to know how he's going and how he is after the crash. Then we meet another guy called Evan and he does not have the same reaction. He is so mad. He's like, "Why were you driving that fast?" Chris counteracts and he's like, "Why was your truck parked in the middle of the road?" It's here we find out that they blew their tire out because there was barbed wire on the road and they ran over it. Then we meet this ginger girl called Francine. Francine is furious at Chris because that car that he smashed into was her mum's car. So she demands that he pays for the damages, even after Chris said that he already would pay for the damages. Now we meet our sixth person. Her name is Jessie. She tells everyone that someone purposefully put down the barbed wires because she found some barbed wires tied around a tree. This was not an accident, this was premeditated. They talk and come to the consensus that they cannot just stand there and do nothing. Chris, Jessie, Scott and Carly decide that they're going to go off and find help. Meanwhile, Francine and Evan decide to stay back to get high. Remember when I said the woods were very vast and you wouldn't ever want to get lost in them? Scott confesses that him and his group were planning on going camping and they got lost in the woods. They then find a dead mink, which I can't, just please stop with the dead animals. I don't do very well with dead animals. Francine and Evan are talking, and it's here that we find out that somebody is watching them. As they talk, we also find out that Jessie was just dumped by her boyfriend. So to make her feel better about that, they all decided to go on a nature camping trip. But they are starting to wish they went to New York instead. They should have just taken her to New York. They kiss and engage in some freaky activity because according to Francine, people always show up when they are engaging in that. The foreshadowing. I love it. Scott is talking to Carly and he's like, we should elope. This indicates that they are a pretty serious couple if they can talk about topics like marriage so easily. Scott then notices there's a campfire set up in the forest. They all call out to it, but they hear no response, so they decide to keep moving. Francine and Evan are on the hunt for food because all the others took the food with them when they went on their little hike. As Francine and Evan fuss around, Evan starts hearing rustling coming from the bushes. He goes to investigate. Francine then notices that Evan is missing. She flips down the rearview mirror to look out of it, then looks behind her and Evan is still nowhere to be found. She then gets out of the car to investigate. It flashes to the other four. Scott is still talking to Carly about weddings. Chris and Jessie start to talk, trying to get to know each other a little bit. Francine is now starting to get really worried about where Evan could have gone. She finds his shoe discarded loosely in the woods. Then somehow Scott becomes isolated from the group. They were all with him at one point and then they're just all missing, so I don't really know what's up with that. Francine hears flies buzzing, looks on the ground and sees an ear. Yes, just an ear, a detached ear. It has a lobe piercing and a double helix, and there is blood surrounding it. She is horrified, so she starts backing away slowly. She backs into someone. They have a contraption like barbed wire and they put it in her mouth like this. And then she is lifted up from the ground with the force of it all. Scott is still alone. He's looking around. He's worried because he doesn't know where anyone is. But then Carly jumps on his back. There's a nice little jump scare. And he is no longer alone. Side note, I'm going to manifest a Scott type person in my life. Chris and Jessie find a dead end. Chris starts yelling out hello for people to hear him. But of course, no one is there. To be honest, I don't really know what he was expecting. They in the middle of the woods. What is yelling out hello going to do? If anything, you're just going to attract wild animals. Jessie then tells Chris, which in turn tells us, that Carly and Scott are engaged. The group of four then start wondering if it was a smart idea to leave Francine and Evan. Spoiler alert, it's not. Splitting up is a very, very terrible idea. I know in Scooby-Doo it makes it seem like splitting up is the best course of action, but it's not, especially if you're in the woods and are already lost in the first place. They then find this creepy little hut, and again, look at all the abandoned cars. If you see abandoned cars, unless it's in a junkyard, you run away, because the thing about abandoned cars is that they were once not abandoned. So the question you need to be asking is, where are the owners of the car? No one is just going to leave their car like that. Cars are expensive. There are wind chimes, and I want to bring something up about wind chimes. If I was a ghost, on days where there would be absolutely no wind at all, I would go around to people's houses and flutter their wind chimes. Is that evil? Jessie, the smart one, is like, hang on, this isn't right. Chris knocks on the door. When no one answers, he then opens it and he wants to go inside the house. Jessie and Scott are like, oh, that's not a smart idea. Carly thinks it is because she needs to go to the bathroom. Scott is then like, guys, let me remind you of a movie called Deliverance. Basically, in this movie Deliverance, there are four friends. They all live in the city, so they decide to go out rural Georgia to spend a week canoeing. Basically, these guys are not welcome by the locals, and they are then stalked and attacked. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Are you thinking this movie might be going in that general direction? I mean, I unfortunately already know because I've seen this movie like 1,000 times. Do you ever wish that you could just have a reset button in your brain? Or had the ability to forget memories? I wish you could do that so much. Like, imagine being able to go through your brain and delete all the memories. All unpleasant memories. I would be doing all that in a heartbeat, and then additionally I would then be resetting movies in my brain so then I wouldn't remember what happens in the movies so I could watch them again for the first time. Anyways, Chris is like, no, we really need a phone, so he goes into the house. Here's a little life advice from me that I thought would be painfully obvious. But if you find a creepy cabin in the middle of the woods, do not go in it. Never, under any circumstances, go into there. Now, I don't know what these kids are supposed to do, but this is not it. This is not the way. Inside, it's a mess. There's like rotten food on the table and flies everywhere. There are also these jars filled with who knows what. There's a whole bunch of weird weapons everywhere, and Jessie finds a bowl filled with keys. Car keys, to be exact, of all the keys that are abandoned outside of the little hut. See, if this was me, I would have run out of there so fast. I would have been faster than Speedy Gonzalez. There are also like a whole bunch of weird knickknacks everywhere. Chris then notices that something is boiling and it's this weird substance thing. Note the arrows on the walls. This is the toilet. It is revolting. Ew. How much would you have to be paid to use that? Like, to sit down on that? Ew! There's also jars of teeth in the bathroom. The tooth fairy? Is that you? Chris is in this room and he notices these fridges and storage containers. So he decides to open it. What's in the fridge, I hear you ask? Jars filled with blood and intestines and organs. Imagine the smell. That would literally be so revolting. I already have a very oversensitive nose. And just imagine all the germs in this house. The germs. Here is when everyone starts figuring out that there is something very wrong going on. In the little knickknacks room, Jessie finds barbed wire. The same barbed wire that was placed purposefully on the road. Chris gets a container out of the fridge. He opens it. He opens it to reveal, like, organs. To be honest, I don't actually know what it was, but it was just a body part. But like an inside body part. Carly in the bathroom is looking around. She notices a bathtub, so she goes over to the bathtub. There is a hand sticking out of the bloody water. So yeah, there is something very not right about this cabin. They all start panicking and decide they need to get out of the cabin ASAP. But can they leave? No, because a truck starts pulling up. A truck pulls up, which means the owners of the cabins are back home. What do you think the owners of the cabin are going to do when they see people in their home? Do you think they're going to be nice? Do you think they're the type of people to make tea and give out biscuits? I don't think so. They try to run out the back door, but it's not actually a back door. There's like a wall behind it. So why even have a door in the first place? Scott tries to budget through using his superhuman strength, but it is no use because he does in fact not have any superhuman strength. Not like our buddy Mr. Nevercracker from Monster House yesterday. Now that man, he had superhuman strength. The group then decide they need to hide. There's a lot of hiding in horror movies, as well as running. I guess all those games from childhood, like hide and seek and tips, they were really just to prepare us for a horror movie. See, the thing about this house is there is a lot of space. This is a big house. If it was renovated and cleaned up a little bit, I reckon it could sell for quite a lot. You get a nice bush view. The owners of the cabin then walk inside. Because they are inbred, they don't breathe properly, so there's a lot of huffing and puffing. They are hiding under the bed, but it's not that good of a hiding place because every single time I've ever hid under a bed, I've always been found. Like, all someone needs to do is just look down and they'll see you there. I don't think these people ever played hide and seek. Francine, remember her? She is then dropped on the ground. Unfortunately, Francine has passed away and she is not in a very good way. There's a lot of blood surrounding her mouth area and her neck area. And there's barbed wire all around her. And as she is dropped on the ground, Chris and Jessie get a front row seat to look at her. However, thankfully, neither of them scream. Her blood does pool on the floor and trickle down towards Chris's hand. Now, Jessie is breathing very loudly as she is trying to contain her shock of seeing her dead friend mangled like that. Normally, I do get mad when the characters breathe really loudly, but in this instance, I'm going to let it slide because seeing that would be very confronting, and it's either that or she screams. So, Francine's body is dumped on a table. One of the dudes has a gun and the bullet drops down and rolls right near Chris. The hand comes down and miraculously finds the bullet without bumping Chris. Can you imagine that? Poor Francine is getting hacked up while there is just hysterical laughter in the background. Side note, I just found this body cream and it smells really nice. It's distracting me from thinking about the smell of this cabin. The cabin's inhabitants are now sleeping, so Chris emerges out from underneath the bed. He has to maneuver his body in a really good way so he doesn't accidentally kick the leg that is dangling down from one of the inhabitants. I apologize, that was not a leg on closer inspection, that is in fact a hand. But, like, is it really my fault that I messed that up? Due to inbreeding, these people are unfortunately deformed. It is not their fault that they inbred, it is their fault that they are then killing people. But yeah, the thing that's dangling down, that's not a leg, that's actually a hand. I apologize. Jessie manages to sneak out from underneath the bed unscathed as well, and she indicates that Scott and Carly should come out as well. They are hiding in a little cupboard thing in one of the trinket rooms from before. Despite crying, accidentally kicking things over, and accidentally knocking things over, they all manage to make it to the door. However, the door has one of those squeaky wire things that alert whenever the door is opened or closed. Chris takes one for the team and holds onto the wires so they don't squeak and wake up the people. However, one of the inhabitants then wakes up. It is now time to start running. Chris books it, everyone is booking it, everyone is running as fast as they possibly can. Because now the inhabitants know that there are more people to feed on. The group of 4 run up a dirt hill. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of the cabin get back into their truck and start driving out on the dirt road. Carly is having a nervous breakdown over the entire situation, which yes, any normal person would. But at the same time, this is a horror movie. You can't have mental breakdowns over things like this. And normally the people who are the most freaked out, they always end up the ones who are dead next. As they run, they find more abandoned cars. So a lot of people have fallen victim to the inhabitants of that cabin. There is also blood smeared everywhere. As they are trying to formulate a plan of action, the inhabitants of the cabin then show up. The group's initial plan is to hide, but this is no use. As one of the... I'm just going to call them inhabitants because I feel like it's nicer than saying cannibals. One of the inhabitants is like a hound dog. It starts sniffing the air. This is Devil. He is a Tasmanian devil. And he's going to join us. And yes, his name is Devil, okay? I just named him that when I was a kid because he was a Tasmanian devil. Okay, there's nothing sinister about it. Chris notices that while the inhabitants are looking for them, they have left their truck running. Scott comes up with an idea that one person needs to draw them all away while the others run to the truck. Before they can even discuss who's going to be the sacrifice, Chris goes. He immediately sprints out of the hiding place and starts yelling at them. As he is running to the woods, he gets shot in the leg and goes down. Scott then tries to draw them away from Chris. His plan actually works and the girls are able to run over to Chris to help him up. They make it to the truck, and as they open the door, Evan's dead body falls out. They finally get in the truck and start driving away. Meanwhile, Scott is running for his life. One of the cannibals, this guy in particular, starts shooting at the truck while maniacally laughing. They manage to lose him and keep driving. Scott is running as fast as he can, and the other 3 are on the lookout for him. Carly finally spots Scott, so she starts calling out his name, which is a very big mistake as the cannibals can also hear her screaming out for him. Before Scott can make it to the car, he is shot with arrows. Carly then has to be physically restrained so she doesn't run after to save him. Unfortunately, Scott has also passed away. These 3 have no choice but to drive away and leave him. Scott's body is dragged away, and again there is the maniacal laughing in the background. They keep driving until they have to stop because a tree has fallen down on the road. As Jess goes to reverse, the wheels then start sinking into the mud. They get out of the car and Chris and Jessie decide to go up to the high ridge. Carly, on the other hand, has thrown in the towel. She doesn't want to live anymore. She's done. She's like, what's the point? They're gonna get us anyway. They being the cannibals that have already killed 3 of her friends. Chris finds a stick that he can use as his walking stick because remember he got shot in the leg. There is also now a time limit on them because it's going to be dark soon. They walk for ages and there's just nothing but trees and leaves and bushes. As Chris is walking, he puts his walking stick down and it activates a bear trap. So now they have to be aware of other traps that have been set up in the woods. That is what the bear trap looks like. Carly, who I presume is still in shock, starts laughing herself and all the cannibals can hear her. So they start advancing in the direction of her laughter. We get another shot of the woods to show us just how densely populated it is with trees. To make matters worse, they decide to stop and have a little rest. Luckily, the rest is very short as they find a watchtower. They climb up the watchtower and manage to get into it safely. However, they feel defeated as they look out at the view and notice that all there is just trees upon trees upon trees. They look around the room and find a first aid kit and glow sticks. Chris and Jessie work together to clean and patch up his leg. Carly finds a radio and also that is the glow stick. They try to use the radio and call out for help, but nobody answers. Then Chris notices the pack of cannibals walking towards the light tower with lights of their own. They all get down and cover the glow sticks, and now it is just time to wait it out. Unfortunately, it is at this moment that the radio decides to start working. The cannibals then hear it and start advancing towards the tower. Jessie relays the situation to the guy on the other end of the radio. She tells them that they are in a watchtower north of Bear Mountain Road, that there are killers that have killed all their friends. But the guy is like, I'm having trouble hearing you, which is not what you want to hear. However, the guy on the radio then says, did you say you're in the tower? If you're in the tower, just stay there. Jessie and Chris start covering the little hatch door with a whole bunch of furniture and objects to hopefully stave off the cannibals from being able to get inside. One of the raggedy fingernail hands reaches through the gap, but Chris slams down the hatch and it withdraws. It's quiet for a few seconds before they then start hearing crackling. They look out the window and see that the watchtower is being set on fire. Carly picks up a metal box and slams it through the window so it shatters. They all then decide that they need to jump out if they want to survive. The watchtower is up very high, so their plan is to jump out the watchtower and land on the trees. Chris goes first and he makes it onto one of the branches. The girls hug one last time. Carly jumps, she almost falls, but Chris is able to help her and she also makes it. Jessie jumps, she has a rough landing on the branch, but again, she also makes it. The inhabitants start climbing trees, so the group of 3 decide they need to get out of there and get a move on. If you want to hear the inhabitants speak, this is what they sound like. Does anyone want to decipher that for me? As you can see, they use medieval technology. And this little guy can climb trees insanely fast. That little guy catches up to Carly. Carly is a little bit apprehensive to start walking across the really skinny branch, so she stalls. The little guy then has an axe, pretend this is an axe, and Carly, pretend this is Carly's mouth. He then... So now, unfortunately, Carly has also died. Chris and Jessie just have to keep moving through the trees. Listen to how terrifying this sounds. Chris must have gone to survivor camp or something, been in Boy Scouts, because he's very smart. He pulls back this branch tree. He gets Jessie to hold the branch back. The plan is to then let it go when the cannibal comes towards them so it gets flung out of the trees. But Chris wants to ensure that the cannibals even come their way in the first place. Chris originally plans to be the bait, but before he can say anything, Jessie decides that she's going to be the bait because she can move faster than him. You know, the bait, making sure that they actually go into the direction of the tree so they can get flung out of it. Jessie tries to lure them by screaming and yelling, but there is silence, until eventually the little guy advances from the shadows. He starts advancing towards Jessie with a knife, and with sounds that subtitles describe as obscene slurping, before Chris finally lets go of the branch and the little guy is flung out of the trees after being hit with the branch and basically slingshotted. He lands with a thud on the ground. His brothers then go to help him, but the brothers are very protective of their little brother. They start roaring, and if you could hear that little roar in the back, that's what it was before. Jessie and Chris make it to a waterfall. They decide to hide behind this waterfall. The family of inhabitants keep walking and they don't even notice them. Chris and Jessie then start to talk. Chris tells her that she's sorry about all of her friends. Jessie tells him that her boyfriend dumped her, and within 20 minutes of telling Carly, she had rallied all their friends together and had gotten them to take a week off work so they could take Jessie out into the nature. Jessie feels really guilty. She's putting all the blame on herself and thinks that it's her fault that all of her friends are dead. Despite Chris telling her that it's not her fault, she still doesn't believe it, which is completely understandable because her friends did only just get murdered that very day. Chris and Jess then hug. Then it is morning. They start their adventure on trying to find their way back home. As they walk, they then thankfully find a road. As they are planning their descent, an axe is shoved into the tree right next to their heads. Jessie is grabbed and Chris stumbles down the slope. It's very intense as Jessie is taken, and then Chris has a dilemma because just at that moment, a police car starts going down the road. So he either goes to the police car or he goes and saves Jessie. He goes to the police car and stops the sheriff. We find out that this is the guy they were talking to over the radio. He says he has been looking all over for them. As Chris is explaining the situation to him, an arrow is shot through the sheriff's head and he goes down. Chris tries to steal the police car, but an arrow is shot next to his seat and there are no keys in the ignition, so he gets out of the car and rolls underneath it. He then spots the sheriff's gun as it's still in his pocket. This guy then steals the keys that Chris needed to be able to start the car. This guy then also puts the police in the back of the police car, gets in and drives away. Chris then pulls himself up so he's holding onto the bottom of the car, so then the car will drive him to wherever Jessie is being held. We are back in this location again. Jessie is tied up, she's panicking, and rightfully so. One of the guys gently strokes her hair before then putting the knife against her neck, but he doesn't do anything because he hears a vehicle approaching, and they have to deal with the sheriff first. They then start into the sheriff. Chris rolls out from underneath the car and tries to formulate a plan to be able to save Jessie. Good thing is that they have a getaway car, the police one. Jessie is almost killed before there is blazing fire at the window, and Chris slams into the house while driving the police car. Chris starts throwing the fire battalions everywhere. Then he starts fighting. He stabs one of the cannibals and then goes to try and help Jessie. As he is untying her restraints, one of the monsters grabs him and throws him, trying to hit him with an axe. While Jessie is tied up, she is still able to access the bow and arrows. One of the cannibals has Chris pinned up against the wall by his neck. She fires him in the back of the head with an arrow. Chris goes to help Jessie untie her restraints once again, but then another cannibal comes and him and Chris have a little bit of a tussle. But by now, Jessie is freed from her restraints and she starts fighting back as well. There is an intense, and I mean like an intense fighting scene. Jessie and Chris work together. They work really hard to take down all the cannibals. But remember at the start, those newspaper clippings? They have a very strong resistance to pain. One of them literally has an axe in his chest and he just rips it out like it is nothing. Chris and Jessie back out of the cabin. He shoots the last bullet and the entire cabin goes up in flames. There's the evidence. So unfortunately, the police car could not be used as their getaway vehicle, but the cannibal truck could be used. Jessie and Chris speed down the lanes. They drive back into the gas station and then we see this man again. He sees the truck, obviously thinking it's the cannibals, and immediately goes inside the little shop thing to hide. Chris tears down the map at the station. Remember the map he was looking at the start. They then embark on a trip back home. And that is the end of the main part of the movie. There is still that little extra bit at the end. The police go investigate the cabin, the one that was set on fire. And let's just say the cannibals are still alive, they're just a little bit more mangled. One of them advances onto the police officer and in the background is, yes, you guessed it, the maniacal laughter. Then that is actually the end. So here are some things that we know. Chris missed his 7 p.m. interview. He was much later than 30 minutes. The cannibals are still alive. All of Jessie's friends are dead. And it's hinted that maybe Chris and Jessie will get together. So, to conclude this video, would I recommend this movie? I would not recommend this movie to everyone. If you don't like blood and you don't like gore, do not watch this movie because there is a lot of it. I would say that the scenes are gruesome, but they are not that gruesome. With that being said, I have watched a lot of scary movies, so I'm probably just desensitized to a lot of it. I don't know, the movie is on Netflix, so you can always try to watch it, test it out, and if you don't like it, just stop watching. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning into day 4 of the 31 days of Halloween thing I'm doing. I will see you later. Bye, Mouse Pack!